Hello and welcome to WION Live Broadcast from New York. I'm William Denslow and these are the headlines. Ratings agency Fitch warns the rate hike and inflation could drive the United States economy into a 1990-style recession in the spring. Russian troops continue to strike military and energy infrastructure in Ukraine, as the situation remains critical, with 30% of Ukrainian power stations damaged. The Kremlin says that investigations into the explosions that tore through the Nord Stream gas pipeline was being tailored to place the blame on Russia. Police have carried out a controlled explosion near British Prime Minister Liz Truss's office and residence after a security alert over reports of a suspicious package. British competition regulators ordered that Facebook's owner Meta to sell the animated graphic startup Giphy in a final decision after a failed appeal by the US tech giant. Some economic projections predict a recession in the United States is effectively certain in the next 12 months. And this comes as a blow to President Joe Biden's economic messaging, ahead of the November midterms. The latest Fitch ratings serves as a warning. It says stubborn inflation and Federal Reserve's interest rate hikes will drive the American economy into a 1990-style recession starting in the spring, which means the United States recession could be less than 6 months away. Fitch slashed its US growth forecast for 2022 and 2023 due to one of the most aggressive inflation-fighting campaigns by the Federal Reserve in history. Fitch says that US GDP is now expected to grow by just 0.5% next year, down from 1.5% from the June forecast. According to Fitch ratings, high inflation will hit household incomes hard. The forecast adds to the growing fear among many investors and economists. However, Fitch says the next recession may not be nearly as destructive as the last two major ones. The Great Recession, which began in late 2007, was the worst downturn since the Great Depression. The COVID recession beginning in early 2020 caused the unemployment rate to skyrocket to nearly 15%. The forecast also sees the unemployment rate rising from just 3.5% today to 5.2% in 2024. That translates to the loss of millions of jobs, but not nearly as many as those lost during the prior two recessions. Fitch says the next recession will likely be broadly similar to the one that started in July 1990 and ended in March 1991. Much like today, the 1990 recession occurred after the Fed scrambled to fight inflation by rapidly raising interest rates. Likewise, that downturn was preceded by a war fueled by oil shock. Back then, it was Iraq's invasion of Kuwait that drove US gasoline and energy prices. Today, it's the Russian invasion of Ukraine that's pushed up energy and food prices. Politically, the 1990 to 1991 recession hurt the political fortune of then American President George H.W. Bush. This time, it's Joe Biden under the spotlight. Now, for more on this, our correspondent Susan Tehrani joins us live from New York. Susan, thank you so much for being with us. So just how damaging is this for democratic messaging ahead of the midterms?
Yeah, as you mentioned, extremely damaging and contradictory to President Joe Biden's upbeat messaging, but also for many American voters. The president, notably in recent days after saying that the economy is strong as hell whilst holding an ice cream cone in California, it seems that the Democrats and the president himself seem to be out of touch with the majority of Americans. Remember, when we see reports like this, one after the other, and Bloomberg is pretty reputable, but we have other parameters as well coming out and saying that Americans tend to wonder, then am I doing anything wrong if the president is saying that the economy is doing well? And it sort of brings confidence lower amongst, individuals themselves, giving a bad feelings about themselves and wanting to do more, and then seeing that the more they do, again, they're not really making ends meet and going to the grocery store, and then things aren't adding up as well. So it's also that aspect of it, the psychological aspect of it, where it's almost like gaslighting the American people, not telling them the truth, and then also saying, don't believe your lying eyes. It's interesting that this Bloomberg report that came out, while it says that the 12-month forecast has reached 100%, we're 100% going to be in a recession in the next 12 months. The model also forecasts the likelihood of an 11th-month recession to 73%, which it hadn't done before, and 30% in the next 10 months. That rose dramatically, and just a year ago, that 30% was 0%. So we can see, how forecasts are dramatically changing. How many economists are saying that, that soft landing that many people were talking about is really out the window, and we really need to buckle up. And then you have a White House and an administration that's looking at you in the eye and saying, everything's going to be okay, the economy is strong. So the optics of it, not good at all. And going into the midterms and even 2024, not a good sign for the Democrats, definitely.
Well, Susan, absolutely. And of course, with the midterms just a few weeks away, this will be absolutely pivotal and fascinating to see how it will play in the minds of voters. Susan, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much for being with us. That was our New York correspondent, Susan Tehrani. Now, the upcoming midterms in the US are being viewed as hugely pivotal, and early surveys are predicting a big voter turnout. Many feel that the well-being of the country is at stake during the November vote. Now, for more essentially looking at the foreign implications, the US and Saudi Arabia has recently had a bump when it comes to their political ties. The conflict in Ukraine gave rise to an oil supply crisis. So Washington approached Riyadh and asked for a price gap. But a group of oil-producing nations, including Saudi Arabia, recently moved to cut output. Washington sharply criticised the move, but it's unclear at this point how the US plans to retaliate. A senior Democratic lawmaker has raised alarms over a possible scenario. Riyadh might share sensitive information of US defence technology with Moscow. Richard Blumenthal is a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee. He's the same official who proposed a one-year freeze on weapons sales to Saudi, a decision that US sees as Saudi siding with Russia. But the kingdom says it's purely economic. US senators are in talks with the Pentagon to understand how real the threat is. That technology has been shared by Saudi is being reanalysed. And in the case, Riyadh calls Moscow, the priority is to ensure that Russia does not benefit from the intel. Saudi Arabia is the biggest arms importer from the United States. According to reports, arms worth $1,400 million are sold every year to the country. Of all US weapons sold between 2017 and 2021, Saudi Arabia bought 23% of them. So a sale embargo by Washington is likely to hit the US hard. China has recruited more than 30 former British military pilots, including those who have flown sophisticated fighter jets. The UK's Defence Ministry says they're being recruited to train pilots of the Chinese army. Concerned by the development, the UK has issued an intelligence alert, warning former pilots against working with the PLA. Officials say the scouting for British pilots was first noticed in 2019, but later it slowed down due to the COVID pandemic. And now, with borders actively opening up, the activity has picked up once again. British officials have zeroed in on a South African flying academy, which is allegedly acting as an intermediary. A Ministry of Defence spokesperson said the recruitment and training do not breach any British laws, but officials from the UK and other Western nations are trying to discourage it. The UK does not have the legal tools to stop the recruits, and China is paying a hefty sum to these pilots. The contracts offer around $270,000 a year, a lucrative offer for personnel who retired from service years ago. None of the pilots recruited by China have flown the F-35s, the Royal Air Force's most advanced and expensive fighter jets. However, they have extensively used older generation warplanes like the Typhoon, Harrier Jaguar and Tornado. The British retired pilots are reportedly being used to understand the way in which Western pilots and planes operate, information that some experts say could be vital in the event of any conflict, such as over Taiwan. Now, for more on this, Mickey Kay, a former RAF helicopter pilot and investigative journalist, joins us live from Paris. Oh, Mickey, thank you so much for being with us. So, how concerned are British officials by this?
I have to say that when I first heard that British pilots with an extensive background in air-to-air tactics, having, as you commented upon, flown the Typhoon, which is before the F-35 came along. The Typhoon was the UK's preeminent air defence fighter. The F-35 has superseded that, which is a fifth-generation fighter, which has more of a stealth capability, and it's certainly something that the Chinese are working towards but don't have yet. So it did raise an eyebrow, but I think we have to delve into this a little bit more and investigate a little bit more in terms of what the possibilities are in terms of what UK pilots are teaching Chinese pilots. There will be a language barrier there, a huge language barrier. So I would make the assumption that they're having to go through interpreters, which will limit the complexity of the language that is used by UK instructors. But then also you have to factor in the fact that the Chinese are going to be using very, very different equipments to the UK. And what I mean by that is the air defense radar will be different. The radar guided missiles will be different. The IR missiles, which are shorter range missiles, will be different. And the capabilities of all of those equipments and capabilities that I've just spoken about will be a very different beast to what the UK are using. And then you've also got to factor in the Official Secrets Act, which, whether you're in the military currently or whether you've been in the military, I served 20 years and had access to some very classified information on the tactical front, on the weapons front. They won't be allowed under the Official Secrets Act to be able to impart that information. So I think there's a lot of factors that have to be taken into consideration here before a judgment is cast on these individuals and the UK government.
Well, it seems somewhat that officials' hands are slightly tied on what they can do to stop these former officers from working as contractors. Is that indeed the case, and is there more that can be done to stop them potentially working with the PLA, and should more be done to stop this from happening?
I think before that decision's made, I think there has to be a real understanding of what information those instructors are imparting to the Chinese. If it's basic tactics, then from my personal opinion, if it's basic tactics, then I don't really have a major problem with it. If it's more detailed tactics and there's there's a certain threat that might emanate from that, then absolutely that needs to be questioned. There's also an opportunity as well from UK intelligence authorities to be able to understand what the Chinese are doing and what the Chinese are up to by talking to these pilots. Now you're getting into a very sophisticated and complex web of intelligence gathering, human intelligence gathering. But I have no doubt that will also have been thought about by the UK when it comes to making these decisions.
And when it comes to the timing, obviously this comes at a period where we've seen tensions between China and the West, particularly the United States, really ratcheted up, especially after the US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan. Obviously, military drills conducted by the US and its allies in the region too. Is this just a coincidence that these reports are coming out now, or is this something that's been potentially happening for quite a while when it comes to the imparting of this knowledge?
I'm not sure. I'm not quite sure when the contracts were set up, and I don't know how long the instructors have been inside China for. I think you'd have to go to the South African agency that are responsible for the recruitment in order to try and gain more information on that. I certainly think that, the Chinese will have made a calculation here as well in terms of, the type of experience that they're getting and what the potential is for, that experience to be turned off, whether it be from a decision from the UK or whether it would be because geopolitical tensions are increasing. I think ultimately at the end of the day, the UK will have a very diplomatic conversation with those instructors that are over there. And I think before they make any form of decision that might impact those instructors working in China, they'll have to harvest a lot more information from them to understand what it is that's actually going on. I think what this particular moment does now is it focuses the attentions of the Ministry of Defence and the Foreign Commonwealth Office to try and understand this a little bit better and take a little bit more of an interest, just to get the full picture of what's going on.
Well, Mr. Day, thank you very much for sharing your insight and analysis with us, and thanks for taking the time. That was Mickey Kay, the former RAF helicopter pilot and investigative journalist. Well, as senior leaders of the Communist Party of China attend the high-stakes National Congress of the party, China's delayed the release of economic indicators, including the growth figures for the third quarter. The GDP data the third quarter was originally scheduled to be released on Tuesday morning in China, but Beijing's National Bureau of Statistics announced that the release of the economic data would be postponed. However, they did not specify the reason for the delay, nor have they announced a fresh date. Analysts around the globe are keeping a close eye on China's third quarter growth figures after the world's second largest economy grew at just about 0.4% in the second quarter. A panel of experts polled by news agency AFP have predicted an average of 3% growth this year, a long way off the 8.1% growth seen in 2021. If the figures are near the 3% mark, it would be China's weakest growth rate in 4 decades, except 2020, when the global economy was hammered by the emergence of COVID-19. One economic analyst argued that the delay in the release of the data is not because China's economy is in bad shape, but rather because the CPC wants to keep the focus on the ongoing Congress. Last week, Chinese authorities had delayed the release of the September trade figures without providing an explanation for the decision. Well, dolphins are magnificent creatures. They're generally considered as one of the most intelligent creatures on the planet. 2 adult pink dolphins were rescued after being stuck in a shallow body of water in the Bolivian Amazon. The adult dolphins, a male and a female, were seen in the birthing area near the Grande River. Both of the dolphins were found with the help of motorboats and drones in a joint effort between Santa Cruz's government authorities, experts from the Noel Kempf Mercado Museum and veterinarians from the St. Louis Zoo in the United States. Although the rescuers said no younglings were found nearby the site.
When females are about to give birth, they swim towards peaceful places. They leave the river and look for peaceful spaces where they give birth. Females who aren't mothers take care and teach them how to fish. Sadly, in the Santa Cruz area, this happens a lot. Because the tide is high, they leave the main river and look for these places.
Before releasing the river dolphins back to the wild and to ensure that the dolphins don't get stuck again. A World Wildlife Foundation tracker was placed on both the animals after they were given medical checkups. Moreover, according to the WWF, despite the iconic status of river dolphins, also known as bufeos in Bolivia, little is known about their populations and habitats. And with human-caused climate change, deforestation, water pollution and agricultural expansion, these species face a bigger threat. The US announced it would grant humanitarian access to 24,000 Venezuelans. Since then, hundreds of migrants have been flocking to Guatemala, but they've been met with tear gas and batons in response. We get you some of the visuals from the border.
We just want to reach our destination. These people here will not stop until they reach the goal to achieve a dream that all of us who are walking want to attain. If we need to walk all day and night until we reach the end, we will do it.
We asked the US President Joe Biden to give us an opportunity because we deserve it. There are many good people here. Please give us an opportunity. That is all we ask. For him to put his hand on his heart. It has not been an easy journey since we started.
Leaked documents allegedly throw light on the high attrition rate of online e-commerce giant Amazon that's costing it $8 billion annually. Amazon's net profit in the year 2021 was around $33 billion. In 2021, only around 35% of Amazon's new hires stayed with the company for more than 90 days before quitting, being fired or getting laid off. Among hourly employees, the rate of attrition was around 150%. The leaked information is based on internal research papers, slide decks and spreadsheets. The issue is denting the image of Amazon as well. The report doesn't specify which class of employees had the highest attrition rate. Now, Amazon has repeatedly defended working conditions at the company. And that's all we have time for on this edition of WION Live Broadcast. I'm William Denslow, and stay tuned to WION for the latest global updates. See you next time.
There are many other